Hello, everybody. Thought I would pop on in here and do a live stream. And this is going to be the first of a new 5-part video series. So we are going to be talking primarily about the anxious-avoidant trap. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Brianna McWilliam. I'm an author, educator, Reiki practitioner. I kind of think of myself as a transformational educator. And I'm also a licensed creative arts therapist. And I've been practicing in the field for over 13 years now. And I really want to talk primarily about the anxious-avoidant trap in this next 5-part video series. So if you're just joining us, make sure that you stay tuned to our feed here because we are going to be delving much more deeply into the subject. And so if you always seem to find yourself stuck in these old patterns with partners that, on the one hand, don't appreciate you, they take your generosity for granted. Maybe they show up with fireworks one day and then disappear without explanation the next. Maybe they treat you like an intimate partner, but they don't give you any physical intimacy. Or they're really interested in sex, but then they don't give you any kind of emotional intimacy and exclude you from other aspects of their lives. Maybe they avoid labeling the relationship and make you kind of feel neurotic for needing that. Perhaps they behave in a needlessly secretive fashion and ignore you for weeks on end and then suddenly text, miss you at 2 a.m. in the morning. Okay, so that kind of tends to be one end of the spectrum. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, sometimes we tend to have partners who are intrusive and over-controlling. They monitor every move you make. They have high demands and never give you any space. They take everything really personally and overanalyze everything that you say. They interpret most situations in the negative, tend to press for too much too fast. They don't respect your boundaries or a need for space. Maybe they expect you to read their mind and then blow up when you don't, and tend to be kind of hot 1 minute and then cold the next. So if you find yourself caught on either end of the spectrum, you may be caught in what I like to think of as a roller coaster relationship or the anxious-avoidant trap. And this is really fueled by insecure attachment styles. So the anxious-avoidant trap is really a situation in which we find ourselves caught in these kind of unhealthy push-pull relationships. And on the surface, most people tend to view the anxious-avoidant trap as a case of opposites attract. But truly, I think of it more as a case of like sees like. So in this 5-part video series, we're going to explore the phenomenon of the anxious-avoidant trap, and I'm going to share with you some of the content that is going to be explored in my live group coaching program, Hungry Love, From Ambivalence to Ascended Love in 6 months. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that program at the end of this video, but for now, let's go over what you will learn over the course of this 5-part series. So today, here on day 1, we're going to explore some of the underlying dynamics of the anxious-avoidant trap in general, and I'm going to explain to you why I think of it as a case of like sees like. On day 2, we're going to go over 6 signs of the anxious-avoidant trap. On day 3, we're going to explore 4 neurochemicals that feed the anxious-avoidant trap. On day 4, we're going to take a look at the role of fantasy in the anxious-avoidant trap. And on day 5, we're going to take a look at 3 ways anxious and avoidant partners push each other away. Okay, so for now, I'd like to dive into kind of an overview of the anxious-avoidant trap. So have you ever thought, I know this relationship is unhealthy, but I can't leave this person. Why am I so afraid of being alone? I mean, this is probably the best I can do. I just don't know how I can find anything any better. I know that there's so much potential here. And sometimes we're so good together. If only my partner would just get with the program and stop being so afraid of love, then everything would just be fine. I know if I stay strong and I love them enough and unconditionally, they'll come around. No one else could love them in this way, in the way that I do. Okay. Or maybe on the other hand, you've felt, I'm attracted to my partner and I think I love them, but anytime we get close, I start to feel kind of suffocated and like they're trying to control me. And then they start telling me that they'll be there for me no matter what. And it only makes me feel bored and even lessens my attraction to them. I just need someone with an edge, someone with a challenge. They really deserve someone better, someone who can return that kind of selflessness, and that's just not me. They'll just end up being disappointed in the end. Really, I'd be doing them a favor if I just bow out now. No harm, no foul. I'm just not cut out for these kinds of relationships. Okay. Now, perhaps you've harbored both of these sentiments at one time or another. And to my mind, these statements really illustrate that those 2 ends of that spectrum of ambivalence, which in the context of an interpersonal romantic relationship, we're defining as the anxious-avoidant trap. Okay. Now, I tend to think of this kind of push-pull roller coaster relationship as really living in an addictive state of take or get mode. So when we're passionately in love with someone or we really want someone, it stimulates a feeling, I would say, that is similar to hunger. And we want to take or get the object of that hunger, however and whenever we can. Okay. So in essence, we're trying to get that which we didn't receive as children. And so our wounded inner child is often aroused and stimulated in these kinds of relationships. So I want to just quote or reference a well-known relationship expert, Harville Hendrix, here. Now, Harville Hendrix claims that this kind of passionate spark of attraction is most likely because you've met an imago partner. So someone who you instinctively know is going to replicate your past attachment relationships, someone with whom your implicit or unconscious memory wants to enlist in order to help you correct or revise what went wrong in your past. Okay. Now, if this is the case, then your parents or any other developmental experiences, okay, they may have provided a distorted mirror, kind of bent by their own need to see you as an extension of themselves or how they wanted to see you, sort of steering you towards having this kind of insecure attachment style, whatever it may be. Now, if environmental factors supported those kinds of parental projections or conditions of worth, right, and temperamentally you were susceptible to taking that in, then these styles have become kind of solidified and they tend to follow you into your adult relationships. Neuroscientists call this, neurons that fire together, wire together, okay? And so if you never felt fully seen, loved, respected, or allowed to just be who you were as a child, your feeling of wholeness to some degree is dependent on someone else's validation and or approval. And this is true for both the avoidant and for the anxious person. It just manifests in different ways. Okay, so sometimes external evidence of worth, such as money, aplomb, working yourself to death so you don't have to pay attention to the emotional vacuum in your life, right? And other trappings of power and success become manifestations of that. So you don't experience your own energy as abundant and limitless. Instead, you experience your own energy and sense of self as kind of depleted and vulnerable to theft. Okay. So if you listen to people's opinions about romance in general, those narratives are usually centered around a kind of story that's very revealing of their personality as a whole in general, including whatever their wounds might be, whether it is a flexible attitude, a rigid attitude, or anywhere in between. Okay. So for example, a lot of anxiously attached individuals, now I refer to these as open hearts because it's important to be mindful of how our language constructs our realities and self-fulfilling prophecies, right? So for example, a lot of open-hearted individuals tend to keep themselves feeling safe and in control by giving a lot, but they never really allow themselves to surrender to receiving because that would be to give up too much control. And they've been taught that it is selfish not to be selfless. Okay. Now, for both anxious and avoidant individuals, partners that are too available or too consistent or too predictable are labeled as too boring or too nice. Okay. And frequently I hear people saying, I want someone with a bit of an edge to them. I want someone who's more of a challenge, meaning that they want someone that's going to make them earn love and respect because they're aroused by that challenge. Well, why would that be so sexy? Because otherwise they don't feel worthy of it. They want to have to work for it. They want to have to earn love because they don't believe that they're lovable enough just as they are. And so for the open-hearted individual, they attempt to make themselves indispensable to their partners so that they won't ever have to be abandoned. Because this looks like things that we typically respect, like generosity, like caring, like concern, like overextending yourself for someone else, it can be kind of a subtle form of passive aggression that tends to use victimization to exert power. Okay, so see how much I give and yet I get nothing back. Okay, I refer to this as the martyred syndrome. All right, and this is just I'm talking about the extreme end of the stick here. Now, avoidant individuals, particularly those that come from enmeshed family backgrounds as opposed to dismissive ones, they might be hyperreactive and interpret genuinely well-meaning overtures as attempts at emotional manipulation like this, even when they're not. Okay, so instinctively, they kind of rebuff this subtle, and sometimes it's not so subtle, attempt at emotional control by withholding their emotions or cutting themselves off from their loving feelings entirely because they feel threatened by this kind of well-meaning invasiveness. Okay, so relationships, they tend to, in those relationships, then they might appear to go from really hot to cold. Okay, now relationships at that point tend to devolve into power plays in which lovers kind of get caught in this love-hate, push-pull dynamic and emotional token economy. We're going to talk more about what an emotional token economy is in one of our subsequent videos in the series. Now, the open heart connects to, reflects, contains, analyzes, and organizes the yearning of the avoidant partner. Okay, and oftentimes these are the aspects of the avoidant partner that the avoidant partner will not allow themselves to feel. And the open heart refers to this as the potential that they see in their partner. Now, in essence, this is one way in which the avoidant partner, and I'm going to refer to this as rolling stone, okay, that the rolling stone avoids taking responsibility for their own emotions and feeling states by giving it to their partner and then trying to maintain some boundaries in that. Okay. Now, at the same time, the rolling stone tends to fulfill those self-fulfilling prophecies of the anxious partner or of the open heart because it then keeps that open heart in a kind of victimized state. And that, incidentally, is also a situation in which the open heart doesn't have to assume responsibility for their own feelings either, right? So there's two things that we're seeing here in common. The first is that both, no matter what your attachment style is, both of these styles are founded upon the idea that you have to earn love, that you're not deserving of it, and you have to earn it. And the second thing is, whatever mechanism they've chosen to implement, whether it's an anxious reaching for or an avoidant pushing away, both mechanisms serve the same function, which is to avoid taking responsibility for being in charge of your feelings, allowing yourself to feel them, to confront them and let them move through you. Okay, because there's a fear, there's some threat at the basis of it, even if you feel like you're someone who's always getting into relationships. If you really dig down deep and you look at the pattern of that, it's the same mechanism of someone who has more of an avoidant attachment style. And I refer to this as kind of like an attachment paradox. Even anxious people are avoidant because they are choosing partners that they sense or even experience has flat out shown them over and over and over and over again are not going to give them what they want. And then they cling to those partners, which means that they never have to surrender to the act of receiving. They never have to surrender to the act of receiving. Okay, so even though it feels like, well, I would never invite this thing over and over again, I'm so miserable, I would never do this to myself. But maybe you would, because the thing we know is better than the thing we don't know. And if the thing you know is always chasing, if the thing you know is never quite receiving, then when you are engaged in the thing you know, then you feel some modicum of control, even if it's from a place of victimization. Okay. So why would anybody do this? Well, because you perceive surrendering and or receiving, as I said before, as akin to a loss of control. So let me give you a clearer example of this. I want this closeness so bad, but deep down I worry that if I really got it, I'd become so completely lost and dependent. Whoever I am or whatever I am would completely disappear. Okay? Or I worry that if I finally got what I wanted, I'd become bored, or I would become the person that is withholding. And that seems really cruel, and I'd rather play the role of victim than hurt somebody else. Or if I was with someone that actually wanted to look closely enough, I'm terrified that they wouldn't like what they see, or they wouldn't like what they find, and then they'd abandon and reject me anyway, but then I'd feel twice as stupid and humiliated for not protecting myself from that. Okay. This is the exact same inner monologue and mechanism as the Rolling Stones' inner and often unconscious monologue. So the Rolling Stone, someone who has an avoidant attachment style, also can't allow themselves to receive because it stimulates the hunger that they have buried so deep down that it threatens to dismantle the sense of independence and equilibrium that they feel they've managed to accomplish in their lives. It also can stimulate worthiness issues. She's too good for me. He deserves better. I could never give them what they really want and need. Better to end it now so at least we still have the memories, or before it goes sour. No harm, no foul. At this point, maybe we could still be friends. So as we dive into what I will refer to from here on out as the anxious-avoidant trap, I'd emphasize that while on the surface, it may seem like this is a case of opposites attract, it's actually a case of like sees like. And if any of this, resonates with you as we go through this 5-part series, I really invite you, if you haven't already, to join our private Facebook group and community. This is really for those of you that may be watching this on YouTube. But I do these videos live streaming through my Facebook group. So if you want to be a participant in that, you want to make sure you join. I'm going to put a caption and a link of this video below. And also, if you are going to keep up with this video series, you can also comment on these videos below, and I will try to answer them in a Q&A as we go through this subject matter, this topic. Additionally, right now, there is open enrollment for a 6-month course that I run. It's a live online group coaching program. It goes on for 6 months. It's called Hungry Love, From Ambivalence to Ascended Love in 6 months. And it's a creative approach to spiritual healing for the love addict and the love avoidant. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, it's a live online group coaching program that reframes love addiction and love avoidance as a spiritual journey while transforming ambivalent feelings in only 6 months without having to endlessly talk about your feelings in talk therapy for hours or even years on end with no tangible result. Now, this is not to discourage anyone from being in therapy or for engaging in counseling if you have it. This would be, however, a wonderful addition to that because we're going to focus on activating the body and approaching this from within a very spiritual perspective. So it includes 6 self-directed lessons that include 6 didactic lectures, 6 downloadable guided meditations, 6 articles and PDF worksheets to complete assignments between live calls. So you also get access to a private Facebook and community, which is exclusively for people that have joined the program. And you also walk away with access to recordings of all 12 live calls that we do together. And so I'm only accepting 12 people into this year's group. So you want to make sure that you submit your application as soon as possible. It is a rolling enrollment. So as I receive applications, and if I think you're a good fit, I'll reach out to you and we will have a private interview together. And I invite you, if you really do have an interest in joining us for a completely unique and accelerated experience around attachment wounds, to submit an application. We're going to be starting November 1st, and the deadline for applications is October 25th. And I will be running some early bird specials throughout the month. So stay tuned to the feed and definitely reach out or comment below if you have any more questions. Remember, our next video in this series is going to be 6 signs of the anxious avoidant trap. So stay tuned.